Welcome everyone at this meeting, which we are co-hosting, and I'm representing Jagiellonian University and Bilingualism Matters, which is an organization that across the world, a network, and Thomas is actually representing Bilingualism Matters in Edinburgh, and I'm representing Bilingualism Matters Krakow, and it's an organization that supports public engagement related to multilingualism and informing public about discoveries that science has done related to multilingualism. And we have a distinct pleasure to have this event today, which is going to target languages such as Scottish, Gaelic, and English, being a minority language. This event is co-hosted by Krakow Celtic Festival, and David, who is sitting here and will take the lead from me in hosting the meeting. But first of all, we have two distinguished artists, and the premier person is Gerda Stevenson, who is a Scottish artist of many different capabilities and skills, and she's both a poet, and she will show her she will read her poetry tonight, but she's also a film director and an actress, we have a distinct pleasure of having her with us today. Thank you. We'll have music on bagpipes by Lindsay Davidson, who is Scottish as well, but he's really not Scottish anymore because he lives in Krakow and he has lived here probably even longer than in Scotland. So he is a Polish Scot, and he will accompany the event tonight. So with that, I want to welcome everyone.
Ladies and gents, I've not got much more to add. I would normally stand up, but I don't know it's not on the camera. Other than to welcome Gerda, thank Zofia and the team for organising the event, Masterful for hosting it, and welcome Lindsay, who knows this place well. A wee word just about bilingualism. My kids are bilingual, so it's important to a lot of us immigrants, expats and foreigners here in Krakow, and so I'm looking forward to learning more about that, and I'm absolutely looking forward to hearing Gerda's poetry and Lindsay's music. A wee bit about the Krakow Celtic Festival, just 5 seconds. In September this year, we are going to have the first ever Krakow Celtic Festival to celebrate Celtic culture. I didn't know this, but the Celts actually started here in Central and Eastern Europe and then moved to the West. It's not all about Scottish and Irish. So, beginning of September 5th, 6th and 7th, please have a look out for our social media and our website, and you'll see us posting a lot more about Krakow Celtic Festival. Enough about that, we're here to listen to Gerda and to Lindsay, so thank you very much.
Thank you. Those were two small tunes. The first tune was inspired by a trip to Brittany for the Lorient Festival, another grand Celtic festival in 1985. So when I was still young. And the second tune was a well-known jig from Aberdeen in Scotland. Maybe not everybody has seen these pipes before. They're Scottish small pipes. They're not the same as the Highland pipes. They're quite different, apart from the fact you can play them inside and not be unfriendly with it. They have the same number of notes as a Highland pipe, but the technique is quite different, and you can play all kinds of things with these that you shouldn't play on a Highland pipe, and things you don't do with a Highland pipe. So those are small pipes. I'll play one more tune and then hand over the floor. The tune will be a tune called Krakowianki. And Krakowianki was written at the beginning of March. It was David's idea to play it today to celebrate the ladies of Kraków, in recognition of International Women's Day. That's where the tune came from, and so it's appropriate that if we're on the theme of Quines, then we should be on the theme of Krakowianki as well. So, quick Krakowianki.
That was beautiful. I hope we're going to have some more, because that was just great. It's wonderful to be here in this beautiful bookshop, and to be hosted by Bilingualism Matters and by the Kraków Celtic Festival. It's a great honour. And bilingualism is something that I have been exposed to in Scotland. My late husband was a Gaelic poet from the Isle of Skye, and our son is bilingual in Gaelic and English, Scots Gaelic, and I myself write in Scots as well as in English. Scots being not the same as Gaelic. Scots, I suppose, is the same root as English. The kind of words that, the kind of language that Robert Burns used, I suppose, might be familiar to you. So in this book, about 2/3 of the poems are in English and 1/3 in Scots. That's not deliberate. That's just the way it worked out. The way I write is, if the voice comes, it comes in whatever voice arrives, and then I write it. So it's much more of an instinctive thing than necessarily a political choice. This book is a celebration of the women of Scotland, and it's called Quines, Poems in Tribute to Women of Scotland. A quine is, any woman or girl can be a quine. Would you agree, Lindsay and David? Of any age. And I love the word. It's actually an old Northeast word, although Burns used it, but then his father came from the Northeast. And it has to me a kind of resonance, a kind of a kind of aristocracy of the spirit, you know, because it has a resonance of queen. But anybody from any class can be a quine. Any woman, that is. So in this book, perhaps partly because I'm an actor, I'm interested in giving voice to others. And a lot of my writing is about giving voice to people who wouldn't necessarily have one. And many of the women in this book struggled to find a voice and achieved that aim against many odds. The poems are in the voice of the particular woman in question, or in the voice of her creation, or in the voice of an object related to her, or in the voice of another woman who knew the woman in question. So I try to kind of ring the changes in that sense, to give it variety. I'll start off with the second poem in the book, which was actually commissioned by an organisation, European organisation in Poland, Czech Republic and Slovakia. It was a month of authors' readings, and 31 poets from Scotland were sent off on a tour one day after the other through Czech Republic, Slovakia and then Poland. So it was a kind of whistle-stop tour, and we were given a subject to write about, and it was Nessie. And I thought, oh no, the Loch Ness Monster, what a cliche. But then I thought, no, you know, if you call yourself a poet, you should be able to write about anything. So this is the poem that I wrote, and it became the kind of opener of the book. There is a prologue, which is in my voice, and there is an epilogue in my voice, but those are the only two poems in the book that are in my voice. The rest are in the voice of another woman. And after all, Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster, is female. So here we are. Nessie. The name you gave me masks your fear. You paint my monster head so small, pea brain perched on a silly neck, and give me a round wee wifey's belly. The real me strikes terror in your heart. My mind broad as your kyles, its levels layered as the cairn gorms. My paps slope with the grace of Jura, their nipples bright as fresh water pearls, sleek hips fit for tender cargo. I carry all our stories from long before the Romans named the Picts, and I'll elude your sonar probes and camera clicks. I'll only rise when you can see beyond the surface, fathoms deep. So I'm kind of throwing down a gauntlet to say, don't look at the surface. I want you to know the real me. And I kind of describe her in terms of a landscape. Jura is an island that has famous paps, which are a Scots word for breasts. So those are the kinds of references. And a kyle is a broad stretch of water between two pieces of land. So I'll move on now to a character who is known in the Isle of Skye. She was a warrior queen of legend called Scahach, and she was the martial arts teacher and mentor to the Irish hero Cuchulainn, who sailed from Ireland to train with Scahach. So she's a kind of a warrior martial arts teacher. And there was a lot of research that went into this book. I had to learn about the women I was choosing to write about, and about the landscape that they came from. And I love this little bit of mythology that tells us that the Black Cuchulainn mountain range sprang from a spot on the Isle of Skye where the sun flung a spear into the ground. And I love the idea that the Black Cuillin Mountains, which are very jagged, sprang up from this spear that was thrown. And they do look like that. They look as though they have sprung up because they're very sort of clawing, the skyline. And also, we're told in legend that Cuchulainn inadvertently killed his own son. So this is Scahach, the martial arts warrior and mentor to Cuchulainn, speaking. I'm a shadow, only a murmur now on a scattered choir of tongues, though sunlight still splinters the waves through my crumbling castle's arch. Like the knives I taught Cuchulainn how to throw, across the bay, the Cuillin leaps from where the sun once flung its spear, black crags clawing the sky in ragged gabbro. The hazel woods of Tocquevig whisper the wisdom I gathered there to share with my fledgling warriors. But my art has long been lost. The way of patience, to balance anger on a blade of grass in the wind and let it cool till you grasp the devastation it might have wrought. How many times, to no avail, I warned Cuchulainn his rage would slay his only son. That temper of yours, I told him, will scorch a land for many moons, where peace might have prevailed. Hunt down your own fear first, I said. Feel the heat of your breath on the bowstring as you pull, then hold it. And take pause before you strike the heart of what you do not need to kill. So I go through history. I thought with this book that originally I thought the idea would be to place people through their professions, to link them that way. But in the end, I decided to do it chronologically. And there was a wonderful Viking woman. She was born in Norway in 1850 and died in Iceland around 900. She was a Viking leader, and also known as Aud and Audur. Sometimes you find with these women, if you go way back, they've got several names. And so this one is called Un. She's known as Aud and Audur, whichever name you choose. And she lived in the north of Scotland, where her son Thorstein the Red, another Norseman, ruled for many years. This book also, I thought about, what is a Scot? Who is a Scot? And as far as I'm concerned, a Scot is whoever's there in Scotland contributing. So we have immigrants and we have emigrants in this book, people who left and people who came. So in this case, she's an immigrant. She's from Norway. And she becomes the founding mother of Iceland. So this is in her voice. And I number the stanzas in 4. So it's kind of her life, really, in 4 stanzas. Un, the deep-minded. That's what she was known as. And I loved that phrase, the idea of that somebody was known as the deep-minded. I thought that was a great term. 1. We have here all we need to leave this land. Oak and pine for the boat, seal skin for rope, and wool to weave a sail. I'll not be beaten by defeat. Deep in these woods we'll hide till our Canar is built. Now they've won, the cat people will lie low while winter snow cloaks the fells and dales we once claimed and held, but lost today. We could have filled lochs and fjords with blood spilled these long years. It falls to me to lead the rump that lives. My mother always said new shoots can grow from a stump to sturdy limbs till acorns drop at last. My grandchildren must secure our line, but not through war. Change has found its time. 2. I mark the tide. We slip away at night unseen from Gill's Bay. No matter what the old laws say, I'm captain. Our kists carry my family wealth intact. Slaves row to my command. I've pledged them freedom. Hope spurs their oars at every stroke. Stroma looms, then Swona, our dragon's head bucks as we near the swelky whirlpool. But I tell my crew, I trust this witch who turns her wheel beneath our keel to grind the ocean's salt. She drives us through. 3. My granddaughters bid me farewell, one by one, waving from northern shores. I've wedded them to good men. This is my cherished plan. From Orkney to the Hebrides, from Faroe to my resting place in the land of fire and ice, I'll braid for us an ark of lasting peace. 4. All is done. My grandson's wedding feast begun. In the great hall, Celtic men whoop their freedom with bone, flute, bird call. Drums summon dancers to the floor, but for me, no more. I take myself to bed. It's time to leave. I have here all I need. My boat will be my cradle in the grave. The Viking warriors and great people were often buried in their boats, as you probably know. The Canar is the name for the boat. So I'll read you something in Scots now. I'll read you a poem about a very famous woman, Mary Queen of Scots, who I wasn't going to include in the book because I wanted it to be about women who weren't necessarily so well known. But I saw this amazing painting in the Hunterian Gallery in Glasgow. It's a painting called The Abdication of Mary Queen of Scots. She was forced to abdicate. And it's a marvellous painting. You can find it online, as I say, in the Hunterian collection. And it's by Gavin Hamilton. And it's very dramatic, and it appealed to me because it looked like a scene from a play. Mary is standing there in a very beautiful gown, but she's white-faced, and she looks as though she's completely absent from the scene. And there's a lawyer writing something in Latin, and there's a soldier at the window, and there is another soldier grabbing her arm, and there's one of her ladies in waiting. She had 4 women who were her attendants, and this is the last one, Mary Seaton. They were called the 4 Marys, because they were all Mary. And this must be Mary Seaton, her last lady in waiting, who is holding her other arm and crying into her shoulder. And the crown is just on the table, and Mary just looks as though she's absent. And I thought, when I saw the painting, I thought something has happened, and it's nothing to do with this abdication, I'm sure. And so I started to look into it, and I discovered that when she was in prison in Loch Leven Castle in Fife, she, in 1567, on the 20th and 23rd of July, she miscarried twins. She was pregnant, she miscarried these twins, and she was forced to abdicate the day after. And when I read that, I mean, I was kind of stunned. And my first baby died just 10 days after she was born. And I remember just that whole experience of losing a baby, and I just immediately felt I could write a poem about her experience. So I did, and it's in Scots, And it came very quickly as a poem. Often I go to many, many, many drafts. But in this case, it just came. So here it is. And it's Mary, Queen of Scots, speaking herself in Scots. Of course, she was a linguist. She was certainly someone for whom bilingualism mattered. The abdication of Mary, Queen of Scots. Tak ma croon, and dinna fash, all yon was our for me, lang syne. Ye needna glom at my silk goon, wi' your coarse nieve. I'm nae threat. I'll sign your muckle scroll, day what I'm on, past care and new. They last 3 days, my flesh and soul, he wandered shores o' hellfire, dool and death. Twa bairns I cradled in my wame all through the months, sae douce o' spring and simmer, slip it cold and steve into the dowie air o' leaven's grey stain was. Clocht frae my jizzen and bury it out by wi' nae prayer, for all I ken, and nae sang. Twa scraps o' heaven. All my hope in their twin licht smoor it noo. Though milk's aye bucking frae my breasts, and are my lace and stays. And I couldna gie a fig for your footerin' laws, sat there, screeving your Latin clatters o' queens and kings. Oh, I could run rings round ilka yinia in Greek and all, as weel's my bonny French. But you're naething new, just ghasts. And och, Mary Seaton, last o' my four leal ladies, dinna waste your tears on gieing up a bitty gowd and glister. Haud my airm, if it helps, but dinna greet for this. So I don't know how much of it you understood, but I think the Scots among you would have understood it. But okay, I'll just jump a wee bit ahead now to a scientist, a wonderful scientist from Dundee. She was called Williamina Peyton Fleming. She was an astronomer, born in 1857 and died in Boston in the USA in 1911. And she received numerous international honours, including the Guadalupe Almendaro Medal from the Astronomical Society of Mexico for her discovery of new stars. Apparently she discovered many, many stars, and most people only discover a handful if they're lucky. Her name was eliminated from Harvard's list of astronomical discoveries, denying her credit for discovering Horsehead Nebula, which is a gaseous mass below Orion's belt. And in fact, it's still listed. I can't remember the man's name, fortunately, under whose name her discovery is still listed, but it's well known in scientific circles that she discovered Horsehead Nebula. And I mean, it's something that happened to women. Famously, Rosalind Franklin, who did all the spade work in discovering the double helix, but Crick and Watson got the Nobel Prize for that. So here we are, and I thought that I would let Horsehead Nebula speak for Williamina Peyton Fleming. Her story is fascinating because her husband left her in Dundee. She used to do his accounts for him. And then she followed him over to the USA, but they never got together again. And she got a job as a kind of kitchen maid in a Harvard professor's house. And he noticed how brilliant she was with numbers. And then the rest is history. Horsehead Nebula speaks. There I am, bucking my head below Orion's belt, free rein in that constellation's fiery dust, riding the stellar waves for millennia unnoticed, till a woman with eyes like burning stars takes one look, has me harnessed, measured, catalogued and tamed. I'm proud to be groomed with such exquisite care by one who can do it all. A maid she was, at the professor's kitchen sink until he saw her quiet gift for seeing light with a precision that far outstripped his Harvard team of men. And then the men come in. I'm claimed as their discovery and named Grim Reaper, Black Knight of the chessboard, they say, failing to notice I'm a mare. They make me want to leap from this photographic plate, leave it miraculously blank, and take her with me, my lady of the stars, who found me first. We'd race the heavens together, gallop across light years, stream through Zeta's glittering rays, bareback, all along the hunter's belt from Mintaka to Alnatak. And I thought I would use the Arabic names for stars there because they were so beautiful. Okay. I don't know if any of you know about the marriage bar. Have you heard of it? No, I hadn't either. When I researched this book, I discovered that many women suffered from the marriage bar, which was brought in the 19th century and was lifted in Britain at the end of the Second World War in 1945. But still, the kind of whole ethos, and in some cases the law, was still applied, which was basically that when a woman married, she had to leave her professional duties. She couldn't continue. And that was very, very common. In fact, in the introduction to the book, I write about this, that there's a remarkable woman, for example, who received the Serbian Order of the White Eagle for her services to the Scottish Women's Hospital in the First World War. There was famously Elsie Ingalls, but this is another woman called Isabel Emsley Hutton, who was a psychiatrist. And in her vivid autobiography, Memories of a Doctor in War and Peace, she laments the potentially devastating effects of the infamous marriage bar, a common practice which prevented women from working in their chosen professions after they had married. In this way, many a brilliant woman was excluded from the thoroughfare and network of professional life, and her career losing momentum. And while, as Congreve puts it, she dwindled into a wife. And one notable case was the artist Dorothy Johnson, whose paintings were shown as part of a beautifully curated exhibition in Edinburgh that I saw, modern Scottish women painters and sculptors. It was just a real eye-opener of an exhibition in the Scottish Gallery of Modern Art. That was in 2016, and that was extraordinary. So many of these paintings I hadn't seen by brilliant Scottish artists. And the marriage bar was finally lifted, as I said, in Scotland in 1945, but having done its work in relegating thousands of women to oblivion. But the culture of exclusion still continued, as Christian Small discovered when she applied. She was an artist, but actually she'd studied chemistry at St Andrews University and graduated with honours. And she applied for a professional post in, I think it was 1947. She wasn't even married, actually. So initially, the company she applied to was interested in the possibility of taking on this excellent graduate until it became clear they were dealing with a woman. And Christian received a letter of rejection, which she kept all her life in a little suitcase. And with the unforgettable words on this letter of rejection saying, "We regret your sex." So I thought that was just extraordinary. And it was interesting that although she kept very few things, she was not a materialistic woman at all. She kept that letter. I think it was a bitter experience for her. I thought maybe I'd sing a little there's a marvellous woman who Lindsay's, and you maybe both know the songs of Lady Nairn, Carolina Oliphant, and she was from a Jacobite family. The famous Battle of Culloden. There were many Jacobite battles, and the Jacobites followed Bonnie Prince Charlie, very famous, and of course they lost. And it was a terrible time, the Culloden, for Scotland, because the weaving of the tartan was banned, the pipes were banned, the Gaelic language was virtually banned. So it was like a kind of a decimation of a whole culture. And Lady Nairn was from a Jacobite family, but just a little bit after that period, and she wrote some famous songs that Rowan Tree, Land of the Leal, and many people assume that they were written by Robert Burns, and they don't know about Lady Nairn, Carolina Oliphant. She was a wonderful songwriter. So I thought I would sing a song that she wrote about Culloden. It's called The Laird of Livingston. Livingston is a refrain that comes into it. Her songs, like many of Burns's songs, are fiddle tunes, so they have great ranges, low and they go high. So I hope I pitch it correctly. I might have to start again if I pitch it too low. So yes, this one is about Culloden. Oh, wha will dry the dreeping tear she sheds her lane, she sheds her lane. Or wha the bonny lass will cheer, O Livingston, O Livingston. The croon was half on Charlie's head, a gladsome day, a gladsome day. The lads that shouted joy to him are in the clay, are in the clay. Her Waddingun was wild and one, it ne'er was on, it ne'er was on. Culloden field has lowly bed she thought upon, she thought upon. The bloom is faded frae her cheek, in youthful prime, in youthful prime. And sorrow's withering hand has done the deed o' time, the deed o' time. So, before I read some more poems, Lindsay, would you like to do a wee bit more?
I could do a wee tune there. The pipe tune is used, it's called the Salutes to the Chieftain, and it's used whenever there's a pipe band meeting. So pipe bands get together every weekend in several places at the same time, and they have a bit of a competition to themselves. That's what they do. That's the typical pipe band activity on a Saturday or a Sunday, or both. And at the end of the day, they get together and they all play the salute to the chieftain, which is how that tune's used, which really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Play some more. Yeah. Great.
Going back to Loch Leven and being imprisoned.
Yeah.
I was thinking there's a tune which fits the occasion, the sad occasion,
Yes.
appropriately. Mother no more.
Oh, yes. I thought I could read another poem in Scots. Hoff henget Maggie. Yep. And this is Hoff henget Maggie means half hanged Maggie. Maggie Dixon was from Musselburgh, which is a kind of seaside fishing place just outside Edinburgh. She was born in 1702. I'm going back now in time. And she was a salt seller. And she was hanged for the alleged murder of her illegitimate child. So she was not, the child was born out of marriage, out of wedlock. She wasn't married. And she strongly denied the charge. She absolutely did not, she said she did not murder the child. So I'll do the poem and then I'll give you I'll tell you the notes, sort of about it, because it's very interesting legally and historically, actually, as a. So this is in the voice of Hoff Hinget Maggie. Death is wapping when it comes, like birth. I ken. I hae warsled through and focht wi' baith. She was blue, my bairn, blue as the breast o' a bird I seen on the banks o' the Tweed thon day. Then grey, rang. The nail string winded ticht around her neck. I ettled to louse it, ains, twice, but it aye slip it. My honds couldn't grup, my mind scaled frae the jizzen fecht. My mouth steekit, naughty scraich, lat nane here. I stottered out, doon to the water, thocht to dooker in its cold jops, but hour late. I laid her, quait, in lang reeds, aching to hae a bit basket to float her out like Moses, all the way to England and the sea, gie her a deep grave, a yont kennin. But they fund her, still as a stain where she lay, and sign me, one at gate, agate Kelso toon, murther, they yaldered, murther like dugs. Embro Tolbooth's a dowie jail, and mercy? Nane they gied me at my trial. The verdict? Hingin'. The doomster slippit the tow ower my heed, drapped the flare, but I loused my horns, and I grupped thon rape, ains, twice, thrice at my thrapple. I dae it this time. The doomster dunted me wi' a stick, dunt, and the dirdum dinged in my lugs. Clúr the hoor, Sign all gaed dark. A chink o' licht. The smell o' wood. Warm. A cuddie's pech. My een appen. I lift my nieve. Chap on my mort-kissed lid. Chap. A scraich out by. A creak o' hinges. I hease mysel slaw. Until my ain wake at the sheep heed in. Folk heuch and flee, against a bogle rising frae the deed. I sclim out, calm. The braw brewster gies me a wink, hons me a dram. I sip lang the gowd mot, sign, donner back to life and hame. I don't know how much of it you understood, the story, but basically Maggie Dixon was charged with and condemned for neonaticide, murdering her newborn child under an act anent the murdering of children introduced to Scotland in 1690. Later known as the Concealment of Pregnancy Act. This was the same crime for which the character Effie Deans in Walter Scott's novel The Heart of Midlothian is condemned to death. In 17th and 18th century Scotland, if a woman had concealed her illegitimate pregnancy and the baby was discovered dead, or the birth reported and the baby disappeared, the mother was often charged with murder. The basis of Scottish law is Roman. Therefore, in Maggie's case, once the court's judgment had been carried out, she was deemed to have paid her dues. Having survived execution, she was regarded as dead in law, and unlike in England, could not be rehanged. So I thought her great achievement was to have got her life back. She managed not to be hanged. She got her arms free, apparently, and I mean, it's a true story. She survived the hanging, and they could not hang her again because she was deemed as dead in law, and so she lived on to have a good life. and I thought it was just an amazing story. And I had adapted, dramatised the novel The Heart of Midlothian for BBC Radio, and I knew that was the same story as Effie Deans in that novel, and so it fascinated me. Scotland was absolutely up to its eyes in slavery. I think we had more slave owners per head of the population than England. I think that's correct. And I discovered that there was a young woman from Demerara, and she was called Eliza Junior. She was born in 1804 and she died in Fortrose up in the northeast of Scotland in 1861. She was the daughter of Hugh Junior, who was a slave owner from the Black Isle, is part of Scotland up in the northeast, and an unknown mother, probably a slave. And Eliza won a prize for penmanship, age 14, at Fortrose Academy in Scotland, not long after she had come from Demerara. And I discovered that the word Demerara means river of the letter wood, and the letter wood is a tree that has extraordinary bark. So yes, there's a word here. A dominie is basically a teacher, and there's always a kind of religious connotation to that. So I'll read you this one, and it's in Eliza's voice, the voice of a young girl. So her father brought her and her brother over from Demerara. Demerara. I've learned my letters well. My copper plate, masts and sails flow across the page like the ship that carried us here, my brother and me, to our father's land, the Black Isle of white people, where I'm glad no cane grows. My mother always said I had a way with words. Demerara, river of the letter wood, its banks of trees with bark, like hieroglyphics, a whisper in my ear from birth. Demerara, Demerara. I wish she'd lived to see my prize for penmanship, that I could tell her we are well and freed, that we don't heed the taunts of half-breed, octoroon, mulatto, quadroon. The dominie's wife says tawny. She told me she'd seen some in Cromarty too, and heard rumours there were others come to Inverness and Tain. And saving present company, wasn't it a shame that Scotsmen didn't refrain from relations with slaves? She was pouring tea, and her spine stiffened in her corset when I declined the sugar. But it's Demerara, she crooned. It'll make you feel at home, and spooned it into my cup. I watched the gold beads, hybrid jewels, my father calls them, melt in the peat brown pool. So I've imagined there a kind of scenario where she's been invited to tea at the racist dominie's wife's house and is being offered Demerara sugar, which she declines. Yes, Gaelic. Now, I don't speak Gaelic. I can understand a good, a certain amount of it. As I said, my husband was a Gael. And so I wondered how I could address Gaelic in the book, because it is one of our three languages, Gaelic, Scots and English. So I decided to use a few Gaelic words, and hopefully within context they could be understood, and to just slightly hint at the syntax of Gaelic, which is different from English. So this is a poem about a wonderful woman who came from America called Margaret Fay Shaw. And she was a great folklorist and collector of songs and stories, and published a marvellous book called The Folk Songs and Folklore of South Uist, published in the 50s, I think 56 and 1956. And it's now considered to be a great classic in its field. But at the time, it got a rotten review in probably the Times or something in London. That I don't know if you know what kelpies are. Kelpies are sort of Scottish mythological sort of seahorses, and the review said it was far too full of kelpies. It's kind of dismissed it. And Margaret Fay Shaw really did her research. She was she was American from Pennsylvania, and she just fell in love with the Western Isles of Scotland and with Gaelic music. And she was a pianist, and she cycled around as a teenager around the islands of Scotland, and she went to live with two women who were unmarried, two sisters, the McRae sisters in South Uist, and she learned Gaelic. She was with them for 5 years. And she learned the language, and she learned to write it, because many people of that generation, Gaels, were not taught Gaelic. In fact, they were given the belt at school, with a leather belt hit for speaking it. They weren't allowed to speak the language. That was very common with my husband's generation and younger. And so these women, Mariandra and Peggy McRae, whom she lived with in their little croft, were not literate in their own language. And when Margaret's book was published, she told them about this rotten review that she'd got. And Mariandra McRae said, she was very emotional about this book, because there were photographs in it and wonderful, and she'd got, all the music was notated, and the Gaelic language in it, and it's in English but with all the words of the songs in Gaelic. And Mariandra said, "There is not one word wrong in the four corners of that book." And I thought that was such a great. This idea, we talk about the four corners of the world, and that book for her was a world. And it was a tribute to her culture from an American who had come over and taken the trouble to learn. So, as I say, this book is about people who come to Scotland and stay and achieve wonderful things, and also people who emigrate. So this is Mariandra speaking. I decided that Mariandra would speak in this poem. So it says, the title is Mariandra Gives Thanks to Margaret Fay Shaw. She blew in like a wind with a dance in it, a load on her back, an Irish harp from New York, and a box with an eye, a graflex, she called it, that stretched its neck at you from folds black and heavy as a scarav. She learned our land, the sea, the sky, our names for different clouds, how to cut seaweed with a corran, to turn a ploch of peat with a spade, the time of year for every chore. And she listened to our words that we'd lost the writing and the reading of, the patience of her to learn our tongue, wrote down our tales and prayers, the one I gave her for the smooring of the fire, when Mary and her son and a white angel will watch all night at the door. She took our songs to her ear and made them skip from her fingers in lines along the page. The sound of our days she placed there with all her care. The look of us, too, caught in that eye for ourselves and the world to see. And when she came with those pages, made into a book, not one word wrong in the four corners of it, a golden ship sailing on that blue cover, bright as a summer sea, we cried to hold our lives in our hands. Okay, the last one, I think, I've changed my mind. I think the last one I'll read from this book is, has anybody heard of Moira Shearer? Yes? You know Moira Shearer. She was a great dancer, ballerina. And she was famous for a film called The Red Shoes. You might have seen it. It's a great movie, a great classic of its time. And we have a form in Scottish culture of competing poetically, and it's called flyting, where you'd have two bards who would compete against one another with sort of pseudo insults, and it's a great tradition, the flyting. And in fact, I've seen it in Trinidad. It's called a tempo, I think, in Trinidad. It's a similar thing. I saw it on this wonderful thing with these guys who they ask for a subject from the audience, and you throw them a subject, and then they compete to improvising with this subject in competition with one another, and it's great fun. It's brilliant. So I thought I would write a poem because what I saw was I went online. A lot of my research for this book was actually done through books. You've got to be careful with online research. You've got to look very carefully and find more than two sources to back up what you've got, because it can be very misleading. But anyway, in this case, I found, what I was going to say about the books, I ordered so many books that I read for this project, most of them, the vast majority, out of print, which tells you something about the neglect of these women. I also used the Scottish biography of, what's it called, of women, which is a fantastic book published by Edinburgh University, which gives you a little paragraph of, I think it's probably over 1,000 women. I mean, just amazing little stories, little potted versions of their lives. And the Biographical Dictionary of Scottish Women is what it's called. And it's just a brilliant book. But in this case, I went online and I found on YouTube a fantastic video of Moira Shearer dancing the Charleston in blue shoes. And it was gorgeous with this jazz band. And she is just so sexy and so clever. And it's not ballet at all. It's a totally different, form of dance. And it's just gorgeous. And you can find it. It's in a film. You can find the little bit of it. It's in a film called The Man Who Loved Redheads. And of course, she had this red, ginger hair. She was very beautiful. And it was just irresistible the way she danced in these blue shoes, the Charleston. So I thought I would write a poem that was a flyting, a competition between the red shoes and the blue shoes, and in the voice of these shoes. Each stanza is in the voice of the red shoes and the blue shoes. So here we are. The flyting of the red shoes and the blue shoes. Redder than madder, or that sweet apple the sleek adder made Eve pluck. We allure, we beguile, stitched in style by a cobbler with a gargoyle smile. A fiend who's out to kill, and for him we will. We lead her, we bleed her, dance her down to death. Sky blue, high blue, forget-me-not heels. We know the steps to take, alive to your wiles. We challenge you with a Charleston beat, sweet clarinet and a balalaika thrum. She won't succumb. We tease, cajole, but the lady's in control. She's ours, we have her, all wide-eyed like a child, craving a fairground ride. She slips into us in a blink, heavenly fit. She's on the brink of bliss. Light as a moth, she spins and flits. We lead her, bleed her, dance her down to death. But see how we release her artful wit, that saucy kick, the deft wrist flick, the divine disdain in her shoulder shrug, the tilt of her chin, the tug, never smug, of her cool restraint. We tease, cajole, but the lady's in control. We'll turn the heat on your slick blue beat, scorch her feet with searing violins, flesh, bone and marrow, toe to flaming skull. We're the pair to triumph with lethal flair. Breath of hell, each step of the stair, we lead her down and bleed her all the way to death. Clamour your colour as loud as you will. We infuse her with life. You cannot kill the smoulder, the thrill, the cool blue burn in the pinpoint angle of her ankle turn. Only once in a rare indigo moon will you see such grace. Her body flows, it simply knows how to pace the space between syncopated notes, heel, toe, toe, heel. We tease, we cajole. She's in control, and the band, the whole house, they're down on their knees, begging the lady, encore, reprise. So I'll read perhaps a couple of these to finish, as a couple from this this book, these two books, and then we'll have some more music from Lindsay. And then we could maybe have some questions, if you like. Just thinking of my Gaelic links. My husband, as I was saying, is from the Isle of Skye, and this is a poem about his mother. It's a kind of portrait of a crofter woman. A crofter is a peasant. She was a peasant woman from the Isle of Skye, probably the last of her generation. You know, she had a couple of cows, she had some sheep, she had her own hay making and her vegetables and chickens, and she used to make her own cheese, that lovely white crowdy cheese that's kind of like cottage cheese but sort of crumbly, delicious. And so she lived a very simple life. She was deeply religious, very Protestant. You didn't do anything on a Sunday. You certainly did not hang your washing out on a Sunday. So this is a poem in tribute to her. And it's called How to Tell Him, on receiving news of my mother-in-law's death. I replace the phone on its cradle, the news resting in my ear. How to bring it to my mouth, be midwife to words that will cut the cord of their braided years. How to tell him. He looks up from his paper like a child over a garden hedge, her fond and only prodigal. I can hear the clock on her mantelpiece 200 miles away, its tick, a pulse to the music of her days. The hen's muffled clucking at her kitchen door. The hot water tanks bubble and slurp as the peat blaze sears the back boiler. The ferries boom at the pier head. The winds whine up the Croft Brae. She's still alive, until I tell him. Sending eggs next week, as usual, swaddling each fragile oval in the press and journal's folds. Tomorrow's pot roast is on the stove, homage to the Sabbath, when, duty-bound, she'll take her ease. And she's skinning golden wonders, scooping salt herring from a plastic pail, their scaled bellies a rainbow in her palm. Until I tell him. So yes, she used to send us eggs every week or fortnight, and she would wrap them up in the newspaper. The Press and Journal was a newspaper. And they would always arrive intact, and they were not cooked, they were raw eggs. But she used to send them to us. And of course, herring you would always eat in Skye with potatoes called Golden Wonders, a particular type of potato that was very crumbly. I'll finish with a poem about that I wrote after a visit to Poland, to a place called Kazimierz Dolny, which is in the east. And I went with a Polish friend and my daughter, who has Down syndrome. And this is one of her paintings on the front of her book. She said it was an explosion of colour, which I liked very much. And she loves colour. So I don't know if you know about I don't know whether it's true or not, but King Kazimierz had a lover, Esterka, they say. I mean, Tomasz says it's rubbish, but I don't know. It's a good story. Pardon?
In Kraków, we believe so.
Yes.
There's even a street named after her.
Yes. So she comes into it. Okay, Tomasz, I was just bad-mouthing you. So, yes, this is something that happened in the market square in Kazimierz Dolny. Red gloves in Kazimierz Dolny. You chose red gloves, work of a proud old lace maker who didn't soften in the face of your extra chromosome, but stuck to her price in the marketplace of the town named for a great king. You wore them with all the grace of his beloved Esterka, offering a poised hand to the dapper gypsy man who serenaded you. Little girl of bright colours, the world is open for you, he improvised with his scarred guitar and broken smile. And as we crossed the majestic Vistwa, you waved the colour of your pleasure to the world.
So our tune called Don, Willie and his dog. Followed by a similarly unusual tune called Drops of Brandy, which is known across everywhere. It's kind of one of these generally Celtic tunes that is everybody's and nobody's. Particularly for small pipes, it's variations, simple variations. So these are different small pipes, but nevertheless small.
You're going to give us another one. Give us another tune. Yes, yeah.
Then we can have some town tunes. So just like Kraków has its own hey now, many towns in Scotland have their own special hey now tune from the town. So we'll have from the Lithgow, the rock and the wee pickle tow, so the rock and a little bit of rope. From Hoyk we have Tirabis Literioten, which is a 16th century song. And another one, and I can't remember where it's from. I'll come back to me. Was Dunsdings are from the small town of Duns.
If you've got any questions that anybody would like to ask me about Quines or about my writing.
The poem about Mary Queen of Scots.
Thank you.
And it made me think, in thinking of languages, that maybe there's a fourth language that you might have mentioned, the French.
French, yes. Well, she does say, she says, as wheels my bonny French, she says in the poem. Yes.
But its influence in Scotland is quite large, isn't it?
It is, and I would say that having performed in Sir David Lindsay's play The Three Estates, there's a lot of a kind of French Scots in that, in his writing. He writes with a lot of, there's a lot of influence of the French language in the Scots of Sir David Lindsay's poetry and drama. So it is, of course, we had the Old Alliance, and so it's a big part. There is a big connection between Scotland and France, absolutely, which is why I refer to it in the poem as Wheels my bonny French, because of course she went to France when she was about 4, Thomas, and then came back when she was 16, and so she would have been fluent in French and married the Dauphin, of course, which apparently was a good. Well, they were very close. And a
kind of nice Polish connection. So basically she was playing at the court with a younger brother of the Dauphin who became later Polish King Henryk Walezy. So they were basically, so to say, playmates at the court because he was a younger brother. That's why he didn't believe he will ever become King of France. But then his oldest brother died, that was the husband of her. Then the next one died, and then the throne became vacant, and that's why he decided to move from Wawel to Paris.
And I think James VI had more editions of his poem on Lepanto published abroad.
James VI, of course, was very anti-Gallic, partly because of his experience of his teacher Buchanan, who was deeply anti-Gallic. So he didn't help the continuation of the Gallic language. Any other questions? Yes?
How do you decide what language to write in?
Yeah, I mean, I'm often asked that, and it's just the voice that comes, I think. It just seems to be the right voice for the character. I wrote a short story, and then it became a play. Then I wrote it as a play based on an Inuit folk tale. It's in a book of my short stories. And she's a skeleton under the sea, and she just speaks in Scots because she just does, because it came out that way. And I remember my mum saying, "Oh, I love the story, but you know, lots of people won't understand it. Why don't you write it in English?" And I said, because she just speaks in Scots, this skeleton, under the ocean. She just does. So it's just something to do with a feeling that it just comes out, you know. Does that answer your question? You know, it's yeah. Because a lot of people, I mean, the Scots language has become quite politicised recently. The Scottish government is pushing it, and it's and I approve of that. But it seems to be very tied now. Or there are some people who think it's very tied to Scottish independence, which I also approve of. But I think that. You know, therefore people assume, oh, do you write it? Why do you write in Scots because you're making a political point? And I'm not. I just write in Scots when it feels like it. You know.
Have you ever written different language versions of the same poem in Scots Gaelic?
I have. Once.
How did it work out?
It's very short. Shall I read it? It's in here, and it's never happened to me before. Here we are. Yeah, It came to me in both languages at the same time. It was most peculiar. I think it was just because it was a very still moment. I live in the countryside. I live up in the Pentland Hills, and I go for walks often in the woods. And it was a very still moment when there was just this very light rain, this drizzle. We call it smur in Scots, and there was no breeze, just this very soft rain. And this poem came to me. And so I write it in both Scots and in English. It's fractionally shorter in Scots, interestingly. And there was one word that I couldn't translate. In English it just was the same. It's the gin, which is the wild cherry tree. And wild cherry just doesn't sound as good as gin to me. So in the English version, I just kept it as gin, even though it's Scots. Because I love the word gin. So I'll read it. All right, I'll read it in English first. Between showers. Only a moment it took, standing there among trees, to let it all go. Needles of yellowing larch in noiseless fall, a clear line of bird call through mute flutter of russet and gold, released from birch and gin, blue firs in fold upon fold of rising mist, and then the gentle hiss of sifting drizzle again. So it's just standing there in a landscape, and the trees losing their leaves at autumn, and the So this is it in Scots. A tween shures. Ainly a glisk it took, stonin' there among trees, to lat it all gae. Needles o' yallian larrick, lown in their faw, a gled line o' bird caw, through quaint fidder o' russet and gowd, loused frae birk and gin, blue firs in fold on fold o' liftin' mist, and sign, ains mair, the douce hiss o' siftin' smir. I think I prefer the Scots. But they did come in both languages, so that was an interesting question. Yes?
Hi. How do you get inspiration to write?
Well, I do sometimes get inspiration. I do sometimes. But, as Tomasz knows. But I'm often commissioned to write poems. and like the Nessie poem, and I think I write a lot to commission now, which is very nice to be asked. But it is faintly frightening. You know, I tend to think, oh God, what am I going to do? And then I go, now come on, and I sort of, you know, I do a bit of research, or you know, So I think it's a mistake to rely on inspiration, because actually I don't know who it was who said that creativity is, you know, 95% perspiration and 5% inspiration. And I think that's true. You can't rely on inspiration. Otherwise, I don't think you would get much done. And I believe that a writer or an actor, director, you are a worker. You have a profession, so you've got to be able to do it. You've got to have the tools. So somebody says, write a poem about this. You go, okay, I'll do that. You know, and that sounds kind of dull, but actually it's not once you get going. You know, I was asked to write a poem recently for the National Museum of Scotland about King James VI and sixth of Scotland, first of England, who we just referred to, Mary Queen of Scots' son, to write a poem about a watch that he had commissioned. And it's a very beautiful instrument, and it's an astronomical watch. It's got all kinds of, it's tiny, it's only about that size, you know, and I mean, I did sweat over that, you know, trying to find a way in, and then I did. And once I get going, you know, but it's often it's research, a lot of research, you know, and a lot of drafts. You know, I go to sometimes like 13, 15 drafts of a poem, and I save them all because sometimes I need to go back and look at if it's not working. So it's hard work, you know, in that sense. It's not always inspiration.
Do you take a break and then go back?
Yes, sometimes I abandon a poem, you know, and just leave it. And I was asked by the BBC to write a poem for the winter solstice, and I had a memory of having written something about winter at some point. So I went back through my files and I thought, I wonder if there's anything that's kind of, you know, there and I found this poem that when I read it, I thought, oh gosh, that's really interesting. Why did I not finish it? And I suddenly saw immediately how I could finish it. And it had been like years since I'd left it. And it was funny that I just couldn't see how to finish it. And then when I saw it after a few years, I thought, well, I know how to finish that. It was bizarre, you know, but I think that definitely happens, that you leave stuff and it just gets left. Yeah. It's a fascinating process, and I absolutely love it. There's a great Irish poet who died recently, Michael Longley, whose poetry I absolutely love. And I think he was rather in the shadow of Seamus Heaney, who's obviously a great poet, but and was a great friend of Michael Longley was a great friend of Seamus Heaney. But I remember him. He said, "There's a lovely film that I don't know if you could watch it here. It's maybe not available because I think it's BBC. But anyway." And he said, oh, it's that thing when you have a poem, you've started a poem and you think, I've got a poem going. And then you finish it and you go, I've done it. I've got a poem. I've done it. You know, and I know that feeling of going around with that sort of secret feeling that you've got a poem on the go, you know, and I love it. It's exciting, you know, because it can take days and days and days to write a poem, depending on what it is. Any other questions?
Are you planning another book of poetry? Because this one's from 2018.
Yeah, when was this one?
That one, the Quines, sorry.
The Quines. Yeah, that's the second edition. This one was, when was this? I've got a book of short stories. This is 2021. I had a book of short stories in 2022 or 3, and now I've got another book of short stories, all in Scots, which that was the Scottish Book Trust. This is in relation to bilingualism mattering. The Scottish Books Trust has a particular pot of funding that it gets through the government for the publication of Scots language books, just as the Gaelic Books Council has, publishes or gives money to publishers to publish Gaelic books, and they have to be 75% in the language. You can't write it in English with just Scots dialogue, for example. It's got to be in Scots. So I've just completed, because I agreed to read it, to present it at the Edinburgh International Book Festival without having written it. But, I'd written half of it, and I've now finished it. And it's all in Scots. I find that it's interesting. I'm a bit perverse, and when I've got... the publisher asked me, have you got anything in Scots? Because I can apply to because it's a grant that goes to the publisher. It doesn't go to the writer. And he asked me if I'd got a book in mind. And I said, well, I had an idea of Scots stories, which is to write some, because I enjoyed writing the one based on the Inuit tale about Skeleton Woman. And I thought I could write some more of Scots stories, contemporary retellings of folk tales around the world. In fact, you start writing and then it becomes something different, but there are 4 or 5 stories based on folk tales, but then there are others written based on songs, like Willie Drooned in Yarrow. Do you know that one? Oh, Willie's rare and Willie's fair. So it's based on that braid and narrow idea. There were a couple based on songs, The Wife of Usher's Well, and James Hogg has a great version of that called The Wife of Crowell. So there's one story based on that, and then there's one that's based on actually a MacDiarmid poem, which is not a Scottish folk tale. So it changed slightly, but so what? It just became, in the writing it changed. And you get these, you write these grant applications and then you do something slightly different or very different. Yeah.
So if you had to say or the same word but in Gaelic, Scots and English, a word that could, what the difference
what is the difference?
Between those 3 and.
Well, in Scots, for example, you'd say it's quite interesting. For example, there's a word in Scots which, it's the same in English. I learned, but you will use that to teach as well. I learned you. Now that I think comes from the Gaelic, possibly the usage of Gaelic. I learned you, meaning I taught you. In Gaelic, it's agionsicug. Hami agionsicug. It's a totally different language, and you will use that as teaching and learning, which is really interesting. Also, Gaelic is totally different in syntax. If you want to say, I love you, you would say mogul orst, which is my love on you. That's how you say I love you, mogul orst, which is fascinating because it's in relation to the point that, came up in your talk, Thomas, the idea of having a different window on the world. If you say, I am hungry in Gaelic, it's han tachkrasorum. The hunger is on me, which is such an interesting idea because it's not like you're not in a state. You're something is coming to you and is on you. Or is at you, and tayakam, the house at me, my house. It's the house at me. It's not, that's a very interesting thing in relation to possession. The house is at me, so it's a different way of looking at the world, and it's a very different language. And it should be. It needs to continue because it's so important to be able to look at the world in these different ways. It's a different window on the world. Yeah.
I haven't got a question, but I've got something I'd like to say, which is Collaborate Sonnegut. Collaborate Sonnegut. Which is Gaelic.
Yes. Happy birthday. Oh, yes, of course it is. Yes.
Because for those of you who don't know, today is Gerda Stevenson's birthday.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Yes. Oh.
Żyje, żyje nam. 100 lat, 100 lat, niech żyje, żyje nam. Jeszcze raz, niech żyje, żyje nam. Niech żyje nam. Niech jej gwiazdka pomyślności nigdy nie zagaśnie, nigdy nie zagaśnie. A kto z nami nie wypije, niech go piorun trzaśnie. A kto z nami nie wypije, niech go piorun trzaśnie. 100 lat, 100 lat, 100 lat, 100 lat, niechaj żyje nam. Hej! 100 lat, 100 lat, 100 lat, niechaj żyje nam. Niech żyje nam, hej! Niech żyje nam. W zdrowiu, szczęściu, pomyślności, niechaj żyje nam.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for this wonderful.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's lovely to be with you all.
Really a delightful event. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay.
Yes, Lindsay was wonderful.